In the heart of a picturesque suburban landscape lies our tight-knit neighborhood, a community where every home is meticulously maintained and gardens bloom in vibrant colors. The streets are lined with well-manicured lawns, and the sound of children playing in the park offers a sense of joy and unity. On the surface, it appears idyllic, with friendly wave greetings exchanged between neighbors during evening strolls. However, beneath this charming exterior lurks a well-defined structure, the Homeowners Association, HOA, which plays a significant role in regulating the community's atmosphere. The HOA is designed to uphold property values and ensure that everyone adheres to a strict code of conduct. They dictate everything from paint colors to lawn maintenance requirements, all in the name of preserving aesthetics and order. While many residents appreciate their efforts, others find themselves ensnared in bureaucratic minutiae, leading to tension between those who wish to maintain the status quo and those yearning for a bit more freedom. Within this context reigns HOA Karen, a figure known for her unwavering commitment to enforcing every minute rule in the handbook. Often seen armed with her clipboard and an air of authority, she takes it upon herself to patrol the neighborhood like a self-appointed guardian of propriety. Her zealous enforcement tactics have led to countless run-ins with residents over trivial matters, yet somehow she remains an indelible force within the HOA. As we settle into a typical day in this community, tensions simmer just below the surface. Little do we know that soon these efforts at maintaining order will be challenged in an unimaginable way. An unexpected crisis is on the horizon, one that will test not only Karen's resolve but also the very fabric of our neighborhood itself. As the sun rises over the neighborhood, casting a warm glow on the perfectly trimmed hedges and vibrant flower beds, HOA Karen emerges as an unmistakable presence. She embodies the very essence of authority, often seen striding down the sidewalk with her signature clipboard in hand, ready to enforce even the most trivial of rules. With her sharply tailored outfits and no-nonsense demeanor, Karen commands attention and respect, or perhaps fear, among the residents. Her personality is a blend of meticulousness and assertiveness, marked by an unwavering belief that order must be maintained at all costs. Karen's obsession with adherence to the HOA regulations borders on fanaticism. A minor infraction can ignite her indignation, prompting her to launch into a passionate lecture about community standards. Neighbors have grown accustomed to her unsolicited advice, from scolding them for their choice of lawn ornaments to reprimanding anyone who dares stray from the acceptable shade of beige for house exteriors. While some admire her dedication to maintaining property values, others see her as a barrier to their personal freedoms. Relationships within the community often become strained due to her relentless scrutiny. Consequently, many residents engage in cautious diplomacy around her, striving to avoid her disapproving gaze or, worse yet, an unexpected visit fueled by complaints from other neighbors. Yet there is more to Karen than just her rigid adherence to rules. Deep down lies a fear of chaos and disorder, a belief that any deviation from the norm could unravel the fabric of their carefully constructed community. As residents navigate their daily lives under her watchful eye, they often find themselves caught between wanting to uphold the community's aesthetic and yearning for a sense of freedom. Little do they know that soon, Karen's devotion will lead to a confrontation that no one could have anticipated, thrusting her into the spotlight in ways she never imagined. On an otherwise peaceful afternoon, the tranquility of our suburb shattered when a medical emergency unfolded just a few houses down. Martha, a beloved elderly resident known for her cheerful demeanor and homemade cookies, suddenly collapsed in her living room. Her husband, Frank, frantically called 911 as seconds felt like hours, his voice quivering with anxiety as he pleaded for help. The urgency of the situation was palpable. As paramedics were dispatched, every tick of the clock heightened the tension in the air. Neighbors quickly gathered outside, some instinctively rushing to offer support for Frank while others stood by, hearts racing as they anticipated the arrival of help. Martha's health had always been delicate, and this moment seemed dire. When the ambulance finally turned onto our street, sirens wailing and lights flashing, hope surged through the crowd. However, that hope was swiftly extinguished as the vehicle approached the blockade set by HOA Karen's latest obsession, an elaborate installation of decorative planters that lined both sides of the road, a town beautification project she had instituted without consulting anyone. In her fervor for aesthetics, she hadn't considered accessibility for emergency vehicles. As the ambulance slowed to a halt, confusion erupted. The paramedics exchanged worried glances before stepping out into a chaotic scene where Karen stood resolutely at her post. Clad in her usual blazer and wielding her clipboard like a shield, she confronted them with a lecture about parking regulations. The seriousness of the moment clashed violently with her unwavering commitment to enforce every rule. This shocking encounter would not only test the limits of Karen's authority but also reveal profound consequences for all involved, a turning point that could alter the very dynamics of our community forever. As the frantic call to 911 ended, Frank could only pace the living room, glancing nervously at Martha sprawled on the floor. The dispatcher assured him that help was on the way. Every second felt torturous as he listened to the sirens in the distance, his heart racing with mixed emotions of hope and despair. Each piercing wail amplified his desperation but also ignited a flicker of optimism. Help was coming. Within minutes, the unmistakable sound of the ambulance grew louder, and Frank's anxiety shifted to anticipation. He could see the flashing lights through the window, a beacon of hope amidst his turmoil. The arrival of medical professionals meant that someone was finally going to assist Martha. It felt like a lifeline thrown into a turbulent sea. As the ambulance pulled onto the street, adrenaline coursed through Frank's veins. Neighbors emerged from their homes, murmuring words of encouragement and concern as they watched the scene unfold. The sight of uniformed paramedics springing into action brought immediate relief to Frank. However, he couldn't shake off an unsettling feeling as they approached his front yard. When the ambulance came to a halt, reality quickly collided with anticipation. The paramedics hopped out with purpose, instantly assessing the environment for obstacles or hazards they might encounter in reaching Martha. But as they approached, their expressions soured. Right before them stood Karen, clipboard in hand, enforcing her vision of order amid chaos. Frank's heart sank as he realized that this moment of urgency was clouded by an unforeseen hurdle. Karen's blockade of planters effectively impeded their access to emergency care for his wife. What should have been a swift intervention was now teetering on the brink of absurdity. With every passing moment, hope began to wane again, replaced by fear and disbelief at what was happening right outside his door. The crisis had escalated from a medical emergency to a bureaucratic confrontation, a scenario no one could have anticipated. As the paramedics approached the blockade, Frank's heart raced with disbelief. There stood HOA Karen, arms crossed and a self-satisfied smirk on her face, as if she were the arbiter of all that was appropriate in this moment of crisis. "This is a violation of our aesthetic guidelines," she declared, pointing at the ambulance parked too close to the planters. Her voice carried an absurd authority that felt out of place amid the urgency of the situation. Frank stepped forward, desperation spilling over in his tone. "My wife needs help. Move those planters. We don't have time for this." His plea fell on deaf ears as Karen remained steadfast, insisting that their placement had been meticulously planned to enhance curb appeal and that any adjustments must adhere to HOA regulations. It defied belief that she prioritized aesthetics over life-saving measures. The paramedics exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of frustration and disbelief. They understood the importance of maintaining order in a community, yet here they were facing an obstacle created by someone more concerned with appearances than common sense. The absurdity was palpable. While Martha lay vulnerable inside, Karen stood unwavering, unwilling to compromise on what she deemed acceptable. Karen rationalized her actions with a fervor that bordered on fanaticism. "We cannot allow emergency vehicles to park here willy-nilly. This could set a precedent for chaos," she argued, completely disregarding the life-threatening nature of Martha's condition. Frank felt anger welling up inside him as he took in her resolute stance, a misplaced conviction that enforcing rules was more important than human lives. Each passing moment intensified the tension, transforming dread into outrage among neighbors witnessing this confrontation unfold. What should have been a straightforward rescue mission had devolved into an absurd standoff between Karen's rigid enforcement and the grave reality facing Frank and Martha. The community's very essence hung in the balance as they collectively grappled with how far their commitment to regulation had gone, and at what cost. As the standoff continued, the tension in the air thickened, transforming from disbelief to outrage among the gathered neighbors. Frank's voice, filled with desperation, echoed against the backdrop of Karen's unyielding stance. "Just move them," he shouted at her, frustration boiling over as he pointed toward Martha's still form inside the house. But Karen remained resolute, her clipboard clutched tightly as if it were a shield against any rationale. In a matter of moments, chaos ensued. People began to murmur among themselves, their initial concern for Martha replaced by indignation over the absurdity of Karen's actions. "This is ridiculous," someone shouted from the back of the crowd, prompting others to nod in agreement. The atmosphere shifted. What began as a community rallying to support a neighbor was rapidly morphing into an impromptu protest against Karen's obsessive adherence to rules. Some residents attempted to negotiate with Karen, urging her to reconsider her position. "She needs help now. Can you really justify this?" one neighbor implored, stepping closer to Karen with a mix of anger and disbelief on their face. Yet she was unmoved, arguing that allowing exceptions could lead to chaos, her words ringing hollow against the immediate reality of Martha's dire situation. Meanwhile, Frank felt helpless as every passing second seemed like an eternity. He watched the paramedics growing increasingly frustrated, checking their watches and exchanging worried glances that conveyed their mounting concern for Martha's health. The sirens had faded into background noise, all that mattered was getting inside. As emotions escalated among the crowd, some residents began to take matters into their own hands. A couple of neighbors rushed forward to start moving planters aside without waiting for Karen's permission. In that moment of solidarity against her obstinacy, a collective realization dawned. This wasn't just about one woman's life, it was about standing up against an authority that had become absurdly out of touch with humanity. With each plant moved and each shout for action echoed through the air, it became clear that this incident would leave an indelible mark on their community, a pivotal moment that exposed how easily rules could overshadow compassion in times of crisis. As the chaos unfolded, the paramedics remained focused and calm, aware that every second counted. They quickly assessed the situation, exchanging brief but urgent glances with Frank and the gathering crowd. With a sense of urgency in their movements, one of the medics gestured to his partner, signaling that they needed to act fast despite the impediments before them. "Let's see if we can get around these planters," one medic suggested, inching closer to the blockade. They moved with practiced precision, trying to navigate the narrow gaps between Karen's decorative installations while keeping an eye on the front door of Frank's house. Meanwhile, the other medic attempted to communicate with Karen, hoping to gain her cooperation in moving aside some of the smaller planters. "We need access to the front door immediately, a life is at stake here," he urged, his tone steady but firm. "If you could just let us through, we'll make sure everything returns to normal after this emergency." But Karen stood her ground. "You can't just remove these without permission. This is a violation of HOA protocol," she exclaimed with alarming conviction. The absurdity of her position seemed to increase as urgency amplified around them. Despite her steadfastness, however, the growing impatience of both neighbors and professionals was palpable, a pressure cooker of emotions on the verge of boiling over. The medics persisted, redirecting their efforts as they worked collaboratively with a few neighbors who had begun clearing away sections of the blockade. "Help us scoop those planters aside," one paramedic called out while maneuvering around Karen's obstinacy. With assistance from some determined residents, they finally cleared a path wide enough for one medic to slip through toward Martha's side and initiate care. As he reached her, Frank felt a wave of relief wash over him. At last, they were getting closer to helping his wife. But in that brief moment of victory, frustration simmered just below the surface. It was unfathomable how a neighborhood dispute could have put Martha's life at risk. As medical attention was finally administered inside the house, thoughts raced through Frank's mind about how this incident had escalated into something so irrationally dangerous, all driven by an obsessive adherence to rules that should never have taken precedence over compassion. Once the paramedics finally gained access to Martha, the tension among the neighbors erupted into a collective indignation. Witnesses to the scene felt a surge of outrage as they processed what had just happened. A brief moment of relief and gratitude for the medical assistance gave way to heated conversations and frustrated whispers drifting through the crowd. "This should have never happened," one neighbor exclaimed, shaking their head. Others nodded in agreement, justifiably infuriated by Karen's decision to uphold her decorative regulations at such a critical moment. Frank, gasping with relief inside the house while his wife received treatment, could hear snippets of conversation spilling out from neighbors gathering on the lawn. "Can you believe her? What if that were your mother or grandmother? We all could have lost someone today," another resident fumed. The atmosphere thickened with discontent, with discussions about possible repercussions for HOA Karen rapidly circulating. Would she face repercussions from those in power within the HOA, or would she be defended yet again? A few bolder individuals exchanged ideas about bringing this incident to a community meeting, wanting formal acknowledgement of how far the HOA had strayed from prioritizing human well-being. "This is a wake-up call. It's time we stop letting her run things unchecked." One person proposed forming a petition, an idea that sparked enthusiasm among others. As tensions simmered and a sense of solidarity among frustrated residents began to take shape, it became clear that HOA Karen's rigidity had awakened a deeper concern among them: how easily rules could eclipse compassion in dire situations. Neighbors began discussing their shared intention to hold Karen accountable, initiating conversations around ensuring their community values humanity over adherence to arbitrary guidelines. Frank watched this unfold from the doorway, heartened by the solidarity behind him yet torn by concern for his wife. The community was no longer divided. They had formed a united front against an authority that had put regulations above urgent human need. The spotlight on Karen's actions promised ripples throughout their neighborhood dynamics moving forward. As the community continued to process the chaos of the previous hours, conversations turned toward the potential legal ramifications of HOA Karen's actions. The very idea that someone could be held accountable for obstructing an emergency vehicle sparked heated discussions among the residents. They began to consider not only the immediate danger posed by her inflexibility but also the broader implications such behavior might have on their neighborhood. A few neighbors, emboldened by their shared outrage, suggested consulting legal experts to explore whether Karen could face repercussions for her actions. Blocking an ambulance could be a criminal offense, right? One resident asked, sparking a flurry of agreement from others who had similarly been outraged by her choices. We need to make it clear that this kind of obstruction cannot be tolerated. Frank, still reeling from the ordeal, felt a mixture of anger and vindication at the thought that Karen might face consequences. He had always respected the rules of the HOA but never imagined they could lead to something so dire. He pondered if there were grounds for civil liability due to negligence, as Karen's insistence on upholding aesthetic guidelines had directly endangered Martha's life. The idea of pursuing action against Karen prompted discussions about community safety laws and regulations concerning emergency vehicles. Some residents proposed drafting a formal complaint, while others considered presenting their case at the next HOA meeting. They recognized that their collective voice needed to advocate for policy changes ensuring that emergencies would always take precedence over arbitrary rules. While some felt hesitant about pursuing legal action against a neighbor, it was clear that this incident had awakened a deep-seated concern for accountability within their community. As they rallied together for support, they started to realize that standing up against Karen's authority could enable them to foster a more compassionate environment, one where rules serve the community rather than impede it. In the days following the incident, conversations shifted from mere outrage to proactive measures aimed at preventing such an event from occurring again. The community was not just reacting, they were prepared to redefine what it meant to live harmoniously, prioritizing human life and well-being above all else. The recent incident involving HOA Karen served as a stark reflection of the dangers inherent in the strict enforcement of homeowners association rules, revealing how rigid adherence to regulations can lead to catastrophic consequences. While HOAs often exist to maintain property values and community aesthetics, this case illuminated the potential for those objectives to overshadow the very principles of empathy and human safety that should unify a neighborhood. Residents had long accepted Karen's authoritative presence, believing her passion for aesthetics would ultimately serve their community's best interests. However, when confronted with a life-or-death situation, it became painfully clear that her commitment to maintaining order was profoundly misplaced. The very regulations intended to create a harmonious living environment became instruments of harm in an emergency. This troubling disconnect raised important questions about the structure and culture of HOAs. At what point does a desire for uniformity morph into a dangerous rigidity? The uproar over Karen's actions prompted neighbors to recognize that their community's focus on aesthetic perfection had inadvertently fostered an environment where rules took precedence over compassion. Such enforcement could silence voices of reason in crucial moments, stifling collective open-mindedness in favor of compliance. Now, as residents examined their roles within this organization, many expressed a newfound determination to redefine what it meant to be part of their community. They agreed that moving forward would require prioritizing humanity over regulations. The need for emergency protocols or guidelines recognized by the HOA was paramount, not merely formalities but essential safeguards designed to protect lives. This collective reckoning marked not just an emotional awakening but also a proactive drive toward reforming HOA standards that had veered dangerously off course. As conversations about policy changes spread, residents felt empowered to advocate for a more compassionate approach, one that would reinforce the community spirit rather than diminish it. While HOA structures can provide essential governance, they must also allow room for empathy and flexibility, especially during critical times. The balance between order and compassion is delicate yet indispensable, ensuring that community well-being remains at the forefront rather than being sacrificed on the altar of wrought-iron rules. The incident served not only as a wake-up call but also as an opportunity to reshape their neighborhood with deeper understanding and humanity moving forward. In the days following the incident, Martha's recovery proved to be a delicate journey. The delay in receiving medical attention had taken its toll on her health, leaving her weakened and requiring additional time in the hospital than initially anticipated. Frank, filled with guilt and frustration, grappled with the thought that precious moments lost to Karen's obstruction could have made a significant difference in his wife's condition. Though she was stable now, he couldn't shake off the worry that this experience would leave lasting effects on her both physically and emotionally. Meanwhile, the atmosphere within the community shifted dramatically. The bonds among neighbors that had previously seemed strong began to fray under the weight of shared outrage and disappointment. Some residents who had once supported HOA Karen found themselves re-evaluating their alliances as they witnessed firsthand how her actions endangered a life. Conversations over fences turned from casual exchanges to discussions filled with urgency and purpose. Many openly expressed their discontent over how easily rules could overshadow compassion. As Martha recuperated, community members rallied around Frank and his family, offering meals and support, an unexpected wave of solidarity emerging from the chaos. However, there was also an undercurrent of tension. Not everyone agreed on how to address Karen's behavior moving forward. While some called for direct action against her, others felt it might only escalate tensions further within the neighborhood. This incident acted as a catalyst for change in more ways than one. It opened up critical dialogues about community governance and revealed deep-seated frustrations surrounding HOA policies. Residents began to discuss implementing new emergency protocols to ensure that future incidents would not be hindered by rigid regulations. Ultimately, while Martha's health became a rallying point for compassion within the community, it also served as a stark reminder of how essential it is for neighborhoods to prioritize empathy alongside governance. The path ahead would require careful navigation as they wrestled with what it meant to create a truly supportive environment, one where human well-being took precedence over mere aesthetics or regulation enforcement. In this way, Martha's ordeal became more than just a medical emergency. It catalyzed an awakening in their shared values and priorities as a community moving forward. In reflecting on the consequences of the incident involving HOA Karen and the blocked ambulance, several key takeaways emerge, underscoring the critical importance of kindness, community spirit, and understanding in times of crisis. The entire ordeal has become a cautionary tale for neighborhoods that prioritize regulations over the human experience, illuminating the necessity for empathy in emergency situations. First and foremost, this incident serves as a reminder that rules should not exist in a vacuum. They are intended to enhance community living but should not come at the cost of human life or well-being. The rigid enforcement exercised by HOA Karen demonstrated how an unwavering commitment to aesthetics could lead to dangerous outcomes. Communities must recognize that flexibility and compassion are vital components of effective governance. Moreover, the eruption of solidarity among residents following the incident illustrates the power of community unity. When faced with adversity, neighbors banded together not only to support Frank and Martha but also to advocate for systemic change within their HOA. This sense of connection is essential. It fosters an environment where individuals feel safe turning to one another in times of need rather than relying solely on bureaucratic structures detached from human emotion. Finally, this experience has spurred conversations about establishing clearer emergency protocols within HOA guidelines. By outlining specific procedures that prioritize immediate human needs above all else, communities can work towards ensuring no resident faces obstacles during emergencies. Ultimately, the lessons learned from this incident go beyond a single event. They invite ongoing dialogue about balancing governance with compassion. As this neighborhood moves forward, their commitment to fostering an environment characterized by kindness and collective support will serve as both their strength and their guiding principle, ensuring that they are better prepared for any challenges that may arise in the future. In doing so, they not only honor Martha's ordeal but also transform it into a powerful catalyst for positive change within their community.